want any more. We're drowning in religious leaders of various and endless kinds, who are all the same program under different names anyway, saying, if you don't believe this, hell and damnation. You must believe this. If you don't believe this, you're wrong. I mean, that's a load of old rubbish. I mean, what we need to do is to be at peace with ourselves, pursuing information wherever it may take us, without, oh my God, what will they think of if I talk about this? I couldn't care less.
Yeah.
And also be at peace in the same way, Tim, of saying, well, we must be at peace with how people receive that information. So how people react to what I put out is entirely up to them. It's none of my business. It's their business. So I'm at peace to go anywhere the information takes me, and I'm at peace with how people receive it. I mean, when you cut away all the kind of programmed reactions, like a software program, press enter when you put this data in and you get the same reaction from every computer. Once we cut away from that and take a deep breath, you just see how even people who go on and on about censorship and suppression of information, who also jump on people who react against their information. I mean, hold on a second. You know, we're either in favor of the free flow of information and let people have the basic human right of deciding what they think of it, or we're not, and I am. And so I have no problem with being attached to the reptilian thing at all. In fact, quite the opposite, because I would strongly suggest it is a fundamental aspect, a fundamental foundation to what is actually behind the families that increasingly demonstrably, are running the global economic, political, business and media system.
Okay. Now, I was looking at some of, I shudder to admit it, but I was looking at Wikipedia to get sort of a more rounded idea of what other people are saying, you know, and I found it interesting, you know, that there's sort of like interpretations of your work here, especially the reptile part, where people say, you know, this kind of took me by surprise, where it's a Swiftian allegory, which or that you don't even really necessarily believe like the reptile part, that you're using it as a metaphor for something else. But is that the case, or do you straight up, you know?
Oh my God, I think I've lost the will to live, Tim. No, I'm talking literally. And when you read my books and the massive of detail that I've written about this to suggest what people are, a few people are suggesting, and they have a right to do it. I mean, the right to be wrong is a fundamental right, you know. Without the right to be wrong, we don't have freedom. So that's fine, but you know, it takes on ludicrous proportions when you read what I say and the detail that I write about. Of course, I'm talking literally. If I wasn't, I would say so, because, you know, I passed a point a long time ago when I went through staggering levels of ridicule in this country, in Britain, in the early 1990s, where I couldn't walk down any street in Britain without being laughed at by most of the people. I would turn on the television, a comedian only had to say my name to get a laugh. There wasn't a joke necessary. And what that did, all part of my journey, was clean me out of that prison that most people live in, which is fear of what other people think of you. That's what stops people speaking their truth. It stops people living their life as they want to live it, because it's outside of the norms that other people accept. And so going through that, if you like, cleansing of that prison has left me completely at peace with whatever anybody says about me. I really couldn't care less, because I've learned over the years, Tim, that what they're saying today, they'll say something different tomorrow. So why bother about what they say today? You know, it doesn't matter to me what they say. And, you know, I know what I'm saying. I know what I mean when I'm saying it, and if other people want to interpret it in their own way, well, that's fair enough. Like I say, the right to be wrong is a fundamental human right, which must be protected.
Absolutely, yeah. Just to be clear, I presumed you were speaking literally, but I kind of wanted to speak to these strange sort of interpretations of your stuff. It's sort of interesting that people do that.
Well, I think what it is, Tim, one of the things is that, you know, when you look at most people's journey from what we call cradle to grave, the range of perception of what is possible is absolutely shockingly narrow in most people, because the system has been set up to keep them there. If you're a few and you want to control the vast majority, you have to suppress the range and expansion of consciousness and awareness and sense of possibility. And if you want to keep people in that prison where they think what is possible is a fraction of what is actually possible, then of course what you have to do is suppress information about what is going on, what is possible. And when you do that, you get people going through their lives dismissing things that are actually true because they are too fantastic for them to accept. And so they dismiss it by reflex action, like the reptilian thing. That's a load of rubbish, mate. How much research have you done on this? I don't have to. It's rubbish. You see, if you can take people down a journey through their lives, and you can, this is fundamental to the whole thing, and you can keep them in ignorance of the nature of reality itself, i.e. that this world is not physically real, it's a holographic illusion, and therefore all the things that people say, that's impossible, you can't do that in a solid world, mate. You can't shapeshift from a human to a reptilian, just one solid body to a solid body, mate. You can't do it. Rubbish. But when you start to realize that actually beyond that kind of version of the world that the system gives us, and it insists through threat of ridicule and dismissal if we don't accept it, actually is the real nature of reality, which is this world that we think is so solid actually isn't solid at all. And when people say to me, you can't shapeshift between a solid human body and a solid reptilian body, well, I hold my hand up. Of course you can't, and I'm not saying that. But when you start to understand the illusory nature of reality and how the physical is not physical at all, then suddenly you start to understand how the apparently incredible and ridiculous and bizarre is perfectly logically explainable. Let me go down that road with the reptilians and the shapeshifting. Okay. What I'm saying is that this reality is manipulated by reptilian entities and others, but they seem to overwhelmingly take a reptilian form, that operate just outside of the frequency range that the human senses can decode, because that's what it is. You know, I'm sitting here now, and all the radio and television stations broadcasting to this area are in the same space that I am occupying now. Yeah. I can't see them, they can't see each other because they're on different wavelengths. I mean, the wavelengths of the radio stations are coming through this wall to my radio. How can they do that? Because they're on a completely different wavelength, and therefore the twain shall never meet because they're too far apart on the dial. And we are living in the equivalent of a television station, if you like, which the human body computer, as I call it, decodes, and there's a frequency range that it can decode, and therefore we're, if you like, on BBC One television. Now, BBC Two and BBC Three and ITV and CBS and NBC are all sharing the same space as the BBC One, which I can perceive because that's the wavelength I'm on, but I'm not aware of them. And if I was on their station, I wouldn't be aware of the one that I'm on now. You know, when you're on a radio station, say Radio 1, and then you go to Radio 2, Radio 1 doesn't cease to exist just because you've moved the dial to Radio 2. It goes on broadcasting. It's just that you're not on its wavelength anymore. Therefore, what we call the world is actually just a range of frequencies, a very narrow range of frequencies, actually, which the human body computer is decoding. Now, just outside of the range that we can decode, and indeed in the same space, is all the other existences, worlds, realities in all infinity. And just outside of this one, in frequency terms, is this realm, this reality where these reptilians operate. And they have to manipulate this world overwhelmingly through humans that are in this world, that are in this frequency. For instance, if you see these situations that you see from time to time in scientific laboratories, where the scientists are working with material which is too dangerous to interact with directly. So the material is in a tank, and they're outside the tank, and they put their hands down these big gloves that go inside the tank, and so they're outside the reality, if you like, but they can manipulate inside the reality through these gloves. Well, the reason that the Illuminati, this network of manipulation within our reality, is so obsessed with bloodline, and why the ancient accounts all over the world constantly refer to the interbreeding between the, quote, gods and humans to create hybrid bloodlines, which have been perpetuated right to this day, is because they are a specific vehicle, a hybrid vehicle, that allow these entities to manipulate this reality from overwhelmingly outside this reality. And everything, we talk about DNA and cells and genetics, but what like everything is, including this wall in front of me, at its core is vibration. It's a waveform phenomenon. And therefore, DNA in its makeup is a vibrational phenomenon, and just as everything is. And so what you've got with these hybrid bloodlines is a which is overwhelmingly part reptilian and part human, is a vibrational compatibility in these particular bloodlines, these Illuminati bloodlines, with these entities operating just outside of human sight and this human reality that we decode. Therefore, the ability to control the mental and emotional faculties and processes and decisions and behavior of these hybrid bloodlines is much more powerful because of the much more powerful vibrational connection than it is with the general population. So what they've set up over the period that this has been going on is a network of bloodlines that have this vibrational connection to these entities, and a secret society network that manipulates these particular bloodlines into the positions of power and influence. And in doing so, you're actually putting these reptilian entities into these positions of power and influence. But because we're only decoding within the range of human sight, we're only decoding the hybrid human level. We're not decoding the entities that possess and overshadow and dictate the behavior and perceptions of these particular bloodline families. And one of the things that you find when you research this and you follow these bloodlines, one of the things that comes up again and again is the way that these bloodline families are involved in what we call Satanism, ritual sacrifice, blood rituals, and all the rest of it, going on, in the shadows and in secret all over the world on a scale that beggars belief. And what they're doing with those rituals is actually interacting with these entities. I've talked to people all over the world who have been at some of these rituals, and they've seen them manifest. I mean, it's not one or two, it's loads. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've been to 50 countries. I've seen the common themes build and build and build and build. And so if you are looking at one of these hybrid bloodlines, at certain times, particularly when they're in rituals and they're dealing in blood drinking, that seems to make this shape-shifting happen. And also when they are in states of high emotion or high anger and fury, it seems to happen too. What it does is that charge, when you feel high emotion or what have you, you can almost feel an electrical charge going through your body. Well, that electrical charge, if it's powerful enough, can break up the vibrational state of the hybrid and the possessing reptilian, so that the reptilian level comes into this reality, and at that moment you can read it, you can decode it, and to the person observing, someone 1 minute is a human, next minute is a reptilian, and then is human again. And it's not a physical thing, because the human body's not physical, solid, and neither is the reptilian. It's all energy. It's the way we decode it that makes it appear to be solid. So the more you understand about the nature of reality and its illusory nature, the more the apparently fantastic becomes explainable.
Exactly, yeah. And that's what I find particularly interesting, too, about your stuff, is that you've seemed to have, you know, it starts with the reptilian stuff, but then it moves into this sort of information theory stage, if you will, this beyond the five senses, this dimensionality aspect, which I find pretty interesting. So I'm glad you sort of fleshed all that out, so we can catch all the people up that weren't familiar with exactly where your work has gone. Now, talking about this new book, Human Race, Get Off Your Knees, I found it interesting that the book is actually pretty optimistic, which is surprising for a conspiracy book or anything in the conspiracy genre. You don't see optimism much in this realm of research. So, you know, what gives you the reason to be optimistic and have the feeling that we're on the cusp of this golden age of consciousness, as you've been talking about?
Well, you know, it's there's so many different aspects to bring together before you know, certain things can be fully appreciated. And one of the key things that people need to appreciate is this whole idea of illusory reality, and the fact that we live, as I put it, in an equivalent of a cosmic internet. And what I mean by that is this: I have a computer in front of me now, and if there was the wireless internet in this room, I would look around me and I couldn't see the wireless internet. I can just see the room. I can't see anything. Yeah. But I would, if I could put this computer on and tune it to that wireless internet, i.e. log on to the internet, suddenly a whole collective reality, which is accessible by people anywhere in the world, virtually, apart from the firewalled areas like China, it comes on my screen. It's a whole collective reality. And when people talk about, well, you know, if we create our own reality, how come we look out and we all see the same car going past and the same house across the road? Yeah. It's because the basis of our reality is like the wireless internet. It's information which we're decoding, and we decode it into what is the equivalent of our computer screen, which goes on in the brain. This world that we think is outside of us, and of course, you know, it constantly seems to be like that, actually only exists inside the brain in the form that we're experiencing it. And so we are like the computer on the desktop, decoding this cosmic internet, and then we are deciding, as we do with the internet we have, what websites are we going to go to? In other words, where am I going to go in my life? What interests am I going to have? What do I make of this website? What do I think of this situation? What do I not think of this situation? And that's where we put our unique spin on it. We have different opinions and different views, but the base reality is there all the time, the background reality, just like the World Wide Web. Now, this reality, I would suggest, this is what I'm saying in the book, goes through a cycle, and it's a vibrational cycle. And as this vibrational cycle goes through, it changes the information that we're receiving, that base background information. And because it's going in a cycle, it seems you can symbolize it, if you like, as a loop. I mean, there are, you know, people that I've talked about. I've had a book about that name too, called The Time Loop. It's like a time loop. It goes around through a cycle and then comes back, not necessarily exactly to the start, but pretty much. And this is where you see in the ancient world all these legends and accounts about the cyclical nature of time. In Asia and the Indian culture, they have the yugas. The Mayans talked about the cyclical nature of time. And what I'm saying is that this cycle, which in our version of time, which is an allusion to, goes over a vast period, goes through different cycles. Some cycles are really expansive, where consciousness is expanding and awareness expands, and then other parts of the cycle, it's more challenging. It's more about limitation. It's more about suppression and experiencing that part of the cycle. And there comes a point, obviously, as you go around, where one part of this cycle is replaced by another. One yuga is replaced by another. And when I first had my mind-opening, mind-blowing experiences in 1990 and that period, one of the first things I kind of started to learn by a sequence of synchronistic events and experiences, shall we say, was that there was a new cycle coming, because there was a vibrational change coming that was going to wake people up from their amnesia. It was going to have the effect also of bringing to the surface all that had remained hidden up to this point, so we could see what we've not been able to see going on in the world up to that time. Now, in 1990, Tim, there was absolutely no evidence whatsoever of any awakening of consciousness. There was certainly no evidence that all this hidden stuff was coming to the surface. Yeah. But it was so strong in my life, and so strong in the synchronicity of my life, and it was coming to me, that the first book I wrote after my head blew off, actually called Truth Vibrations, and it was called Truth Vibrations after this vibrational change that I was learning about. Now, 20 years later, let's look at it again. Look what's happened in terms of people awakening to a new sense of self in the world. And my goodness, look what's happened in terms of what's been hidden to us coming to the surface. Yeah. I mean, look what we know now we didn't know 5 years ago, 3 years ago, never mind 15 and 20. And so what we're looking at, I would suggest, is living through a period where we're on the cusp, where one period, one yuga, for want of a term, one period of this cycle is which is based on suppression and limitation, and what people might call a dark period, and we're moving out of that into a period which will be about a massive expansion of consciousness and awareness and understanding and perception of self in the world, seeing the unity of everything rather than seeing everything as divided and apart from everything else. But of course, there's a point where the two are basically existing together. There's going to come a tipping point where the new epoch, the new energy, will become the dominant one. And that's not too many years away, I would suggest. But at the moment, we're still in a period where, up to this point, the previous yuga energy is still dominant, though losing its dominance with everyone that starts to wake up and perceive life in a different way. And so people, and I completely understand this, look at what's happening in the world now, and I'm kind of monitoring it and tracking it and everything on my website every day, where the control system, it seems to be getting more and more power and all the rest of it in so many areas and pushing itself on. What I'm saying in the book, and I'm saying here, is that we can read that another way, and that is that we are in the process of seeing the control system's death throes, where it's throwing everything it can at us like a cornered rat to try to hold on to a power structure which is in its dying days. You see, these people, Tim, these entities, they don't want to be on public display. Yeah. They would much rather go on as they have in the past, controlling covertly, where people are controlled without realizing, the extent to which they're controlled. Some people they're controlled at all, and certainly not understanding the ultimate force behind that control. That's what they want, because you can go like that forever. But what's happening, and I talk about this in the book, that these entities, because they're not actually in the timeline that we're experiencing, they can see down our timeline. They can see things to a certain extent further along the timeline than we can. They have known for a considerable amount of time that this energetic change, this awakening, was coming. And what they've been planning for, and that's why it's at this time of all times, when the control system is throwing everything at us, that this awakening is happening. That's not a coincidence. Those two things are completely connected, because the control system is trying to batten down the hatches and hold the dike against this vibrational change. And of course, it's whistling in the dark, because of course you can't stop this energetic change. It's going to happen, but it's trying to, and for the next few years it's going to seem as if the control system is going to prevail, and then the whole thing's going to come down, because we're going to reach the point where this new energy, these truth vibrations, the energy of expansion and of the new epoch is going to become the dominant one. And I think we're seeing some signs of that all the time. Well, I am anyway, as I see people wake up who I thought would never wake up in this lifetime. Yeah. And so we are at a very amazing time where we are living through this epoch change. And the more that we stop cooperating with the system and stop acquiescing with it, the less extreme it will be before it actually comes down, because it is coming down. But if we just walk away and do nothing, or just acquiesce, yes sir, no sir, then it's going to get even more extreme before it actually comes down, which is going to be very, very unpleasant indeed.
But what you're saying is, eventually, no matter what, this police state, New World Order, whatever you want to call it, Illuminati, all that stuff, is bound to fail because of this impending golden age of consciousness.
Yes, I'm absolutely saying that. Like I say, it's no accident or coincidence that the police state, not just the police state covertly, because for a long time we've been controlled covertly, for an enormous amount of time, of course. But I mean, what I'm talking about is it's now becoming blatantly obvious to more and more people. I mean, never mind the reptilian thing, never mind this energetic stuff that I'm talking about. Let's just go on the basic everyday experience of people. More and more people are saying, I mean, I know a police officer, quite a high one actually, who's saying, all our freedoms are being taken away. It's incredible, it's terrible. And so even they're starting to see it now. And it's on public display, because they are having to become more and more extreme in their efforts to stop this awakening happening, because the awakening is happening. See, everything connects to, once you start to see these basic themes. We are being bombarded with genetically modified food, with electromagnetic pollution and chemically infested food, because the body computer is a electrochemical organism on one level, and therefore it has an optimum electrochemical balance to best decode reality in its sharpest, most expansive form. And so all these things are constantly destabilizing the electrochemical balance, so it does not function. It's like a computer with a virus in it. It's not working properly. It's not decoding reality. It's not decoding information in the way that it could. This is also one of the key reasons, not the only reason, there are many, but one of the key reasons why the system is designed to create maximum fear, maximum stress, maximum anxiety, maximum worry. It's because those low vibrational, imbalanced emotions also knock the body computer decoding system out of kilter, and that's what they're trying to do. And you know, it's it sounds a very negative thing, but actually when you think about it, it's a very, very positive thing when you take it from this perspective. Look at all the different multi-levels that they're having to manipulate us through and all the different things they're having to throw at us. And that tells you something, and that is that humans in their true form, in their true expression of potential, are fantastic genius. And of amazing potential and amazing abilities and amazing potential for expansion of awareness and seeing beyond the illusion. But and that's why they have to throw these things at us all the time, and why they're having to throw more and more and more all the time is because the awakening is getting stronger and stronger and stronger all the time, and they're terrified of it.
Very interesting, very interesting. Like I said, surprisingly optimistic. Are you sure you're a conspiracy theory researcher or not? I don't know here with this optimism, but I'll take it.
Well, you know, when I was going through my mass awakening in 1990-91, and the truth vibration stuff came up and all that was going to happen, one of the key themes was, this is not an if and it's not a maybe. It's basically a done deal. This epoch change is going to happen. The question for humanity is this, I was told: how are you going to interact with this change? You know, are you going to stand in the river, which is getting faster and faster in its flow by the day, and stand there and say, I ain't moving, I'm going to stay how I was before, I'm going to hold my status quo, I ain't changing? Or are you going to get on the airbed and just flow with it and enjoy the ride, the amazing change and expansion of consciousness and awareness and potential that is there for the taking? And of course, you know, you can look at the world, Tim, and you can see those people who have got on the airbed and are flowing with it, and you can see the people who are still standing there saying, I ain't moving. And funnily enough, there's quite a number of those people, I ain't moving, within conspiracy research. And it takes the form of, and I'm not knocking this at all, I'm just making an observation.
Yeah.
It takes the form of, I will only accept there's a conspiracy based on human beings, the 5 sense level, political intrigue, greedy corporations, and greedy families who want to control the world for their own greed. I ain't going any further than that. And by the way, my religion has to be part of this as well, or I ain't going there either. And what we are being challenged to do in this epoch change, this energetic change, and therefore this opportunity to expand consciousness, is to realize that we've been living in a box of perception so unbelievably small compared with what there is to see and what there is to perceive. And basically it's like you can go on the internet in most countries of the world still, and you can go anywhere you want on the internet. But you go into China and they firewalled off vast areas of the internet that Chinese people can't access because the authorities there don't want them to get access to that information because it will change their perception of the Chinese authorities. And that's not just symbolic, it's a very strong analogy of what's happened to humanity. We've been manipulated to live our lives in a tiny, tiny, firewalled off box of reality, and we have accepted through that there are very strict limitations to everything, limitations to possibility. It's like people say, look, this guy, mate, all right, he's just said he saw this UFO appear out of nowhere and then disappear, okay? He's on something. Don't you talk to me about that. That's ludicrous. Now, if you're in the box and you've gone through this process of allowing your sense of possibility to be concertinaed like that, to be limited like that, then to you, that's impossible. But when you get even the basics of this reality, which is a frequency range, then something coming into this frequency range, I can see it, and because it came into this frequency range from another reality. It appeared to appear out of nowhere. All it did was change its vibrational state to sync with this one. Therefore, I can now see it with my decoding mechanism called eyes and brain, and then it goes back and reverts to its original vibrational state, frequency state, and therefore it's gone outside of my ability to decode it, and to my perception, to my observation, it has disappeared into nowhere. Now, you know, this is what I'm talking about earlier, Tim, when if you can suppress people's sense of what's possible, they will laugh in the face of the truth because they'll think it's too fantastic to be real.
Yeah, exactly. Another aspect to the new book that I found interesting is you sort of brought the moon into all this and suggest that, for lack of a better term, the moon's sort of like the headquarters for these reptilians. So my first thought is, should we blow up the moon? I'm just
well, no. Well, I think that would have a few rather large implications. No, I'll tell you where it came from, and really, I need to kind of talk about some of the stuff that happened to me 20 years ago.
That's fine.
To get people to see where I'm kind of coming from. When I was a television presenter and a national spokesman for the British Green Party through the 1980s, towards the end of the 80s, I had this strange experience that got more and more powerful. And that is that when I was in a room alone, suddenly they didn't seem to be, I didn't seem to be alone. There seemed to be another presence there. And over a period of a year, it built up and built up and built up until eventually I was sitting on the side of a bed in a hotel in London when I was working for the BBC, and I said into the space of the room, if there's something there, would you please contact me because you're driving me up the wall. And about, I don't know, a matter of not long later, days rather than weeks later, a series of events happened which took me to a psychic. And all I did was I went along, because I've got rheumatoid arthritis, and I went along to her and I said, look, I've got rheumatoid arthritis. I'm not taking drugs for it because I want my body to last me a lifetime, a long lifetime. So can you do your hands-on healing? Told her nothing else. Didn't tell her what had been happening to me or anything. So I went a couple of times, got the healing and all this stuff, and then I went the third time, and suddenly in the middle of it, I felt like a spider's web on my face, like a cobweb. And this kind of hit me because I'd read in this lady's book, who as part of the synchronicity of me getting to her, that sometimes when other levels of reality, consciousness, whatever you want to call them, are trying to lock into you, you sometimes feel like a spider's web on your face.
Okay.
Anyway, about 15, I never said anything to her about what I was feeling. I just thought, oh, God, that's that spider's web I feel. Anyway, about 15 seconds later, she kicks her head back and says, my God, I'm going to have to close my eyes for this one, and starts saying that she was seeing this figure in her mind and was giving me information. And it was that I was going to go out. I mean, just think of it, Tim. At this time, I'm presenting sport for the BBC and news, and I'm a national spokesman of the Green Party, and suddenly this lady's telling me that she's being told to tell me I'm going to go out on a world stage and reveal great secrets. Where I'm going with this is one of the things, I was told a load of things at that time, and again in another meeting with her a week later, which have all happened. Apart from one thing, they've all happened, and or are happening. And two of the things that I was told was this. This is 20 years ago nearly. So it is 20 years ago. Sometimes he will say things and wonder where they came from. They will be our words. And knowledge will be put into his mind, and at other times he will be led to knowledge. Well, we have a famous advertisement in this country for household stuff, and the punchline is it does exactly what it says on the tin. And I have to say that over the last 20 years, what I've just said has done exactly what it said on the tin. Yeah. What has happened is that I've had these kind of, if you like, insights out of nowhere about something, and then all the, if you like, 5 sense level of research has come to me after that initial insight. This has been going on for the best part of 20 years, and so I recognize it. I recognize it when the energy in the room changes and suddenly some insight comes in. So what happened with the moon, Tim, was I was writing this book, Human Race Get Off Your Knees, and I wasn't incorporating the moon at that time. And I sat down at this very computer where I'm sitting now, and the energy in the room changed very demonstrably. And what suddenly went through my mind very clearly was the moon's not real. The moon's a construct, right? So I sat there and I thought, well, I've been here many times before, but the moon's not real. Let's have a look at this. So what I did, expecting to find nothing, is I typed in various words into a search engine based on that kind of theme, and within, oh God, no more than a minute, 2 minutes, up it came, a book called Who Built the Moon by two researchers called Christopher Knight and Alan Butler. And I sent for it, and I read it immediately, and I was kind of taken aback by a lot of the information in it, because it was saying the moon cannot be real. And I'm thinking, well, that's exactly what the insight came. So I then, of course, as you do, I turned my focus on this, and as with the process over the last 20 years, after the insight, the 5 sense information comes my way pretty quickly. And one of the things that they say in this book is the moon is bigger than it should be, apparently older than it should be, much lighter in mass than it should be. It occupies an unlikely orbit, and is also so extraordinary that all existing explanations for its presence are fraught with difficulties, and none of them could be considered remotely watertight. And it's an interesting thing that relates to many things here, because we're born into this world. This is where the box and the limitation of perception of possibility comes in. We're born into this world, and it's like, well, this is how the world is, mate, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this is just a quick aside, but an important one. This is why we are the generations alive today, older generations alive today, are playing such a very, very important role, because we have still the ability to compare what the world was like before to what it is now and becoming now. Young people born into the world now are born into the world of the police state. They're born into schools with cameras all over the place. They're born into schools where they're giving fingerprints for their school meals. To them, this surveillance and control is, well, that's the way it is, mate. So, you know, and it's the same with the moon. It comes up, it goes through its cycle, and well, of course, it's the moon, mate. Of course, it's always been there. Well, when you start to do the research, and I do a lot of stuff in the book on it, you find that actually there are extraordinary anomalies relating to the moon. Like, it's much bigger than it should be. I mean, it's been postulated by some scientific writers that if the Earth had a satellite at all, and with its magnetic field that is far from certain, it should be maybe 30 miles around. This one's 2,160, I think it is, miles around. It's massive. I mean, some scientists even talk not about a moon-planet relationship, but a dual planet relationship. Yeah. Then you ask the question, where did the moon come from? And then you find something else that you come across again and again and again in different areas, that what is accepted as scientific fact actually turns out to be a scientific theory. The official theory, which has been accepted as fact by repetition, like most fact is that the Earth was hit in its earliest times of formation by a Mars-type planet, and a great chunk broke off and became the moon. When the physics of that didn't work out, they called the first one the whack theory. They then came up, when the physics didn't work out, with the double whack theory, which is that this Mars-type planet hit the Earth and then came back and gave it another go, you know, the old 1-2. And, you know, talk about desperate. And it's interesting, too, as I continue with this research. I didn't know this at the time, but, you know, two Russian scientists in the 1970s wrote a detailed paper about the fact that the moon is a construct, and that it's been hollowed out, like a hollowed-out planetoid, and it's become like a gigantic space vehicle to, you know, traverse the cosmos. And they say that much of the inside of the moon was hollowed out and became the outside of the moon. And it's interesting that some scientists have said about the moon, it's inside out. What's on the surface of the moon should really be on the inside. Another scientist, Erwin Shapiro from the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, said the best explanation for the moon is observational error. The moon doesn't exist because by the laws of physics and all the rest of it, it shouldn't exist in that place, in that size. And another thing that the Who Built the Moon book points out very, very well indeed is the extraordinary relationship, geometrical relationship between the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun. And people need to just sort of read that book, or kind of read Maurice Gaddafi needs to get into the detail. But I tell you, the relationship is fantastic, and it only works between the Moon, the Earth and the sun, not with the other planets. And the key to making it work is the Moon. What then happened as this was unfolding is I got on to the oracle, Credo Mutwa, the Zulu shaman, who's well into his 80s now, and is the most extraordinary, brilliant expert in all the different legends and laws and accounts of ancient Africa. People in researching, the background to all this, researching the history of all this, one of the places they have missed massively so often is Africa. The African legends are incredible in the way that if you take their symbolism and bring it into the modern world, you can see that they are talking about things that scientists have now understood. For instance, the Zulus, and I found the Zulu legends, Credo's a Zulu, I found the Zulu legends over the years to be extraordinarily accurate in this way. Their words for time and space are virtually identically the same word, because they understood eons ago that time and space were, in effect, the same thing. Anyway, I get on to Credo Mutwa, and I say nothing to him about all the stuff that I'm putting together on the moon, and I'm being very surprised by it as I'm coming across it. Crikey, I didn't realize that about the moon. And I just said to him, can you tell me any Zulu legends about the moon? And off he goes. Yes, Mr. David, he said, and away he went. I mean, the man's a library on legs. And he said, yes, we say that the moon is an egg. And again, anthropologists are people that go, they say the moon's an egg. They're very primitive people. Why do they symbolize the moon as an egg? Because they say the moon was hollowed out and turned into a craft which was rolled across the heavens, as their legend goes, to the earth, and when it arrived, it created devastation on the earth, as it would, a body that large getting that close, and it made the earth move. Now, when you look at all these ancient accounts all over the world about the great cataclysm, what the Bible calls the Great Flood, one of the common themes is the earth turned over. Now, if the moon came in to where it is now, the earth would turn over. The earth is spinning at the angle it's spinning, and it's spinning at the speed it's spinning because of the influence of the moon. The moon has massive influence clearly over the tides and water, and the human body is massively overwhelmingly made up of water. So, of course, then you look at the influence of the moon, even the moon without any of the other stuff that I'm talking about that's going on inside it, and that influence on the human hormonal systems is fundamental. And then what Credo said, I said, well, who's behind this moon then, acting ignorant? Because the one thing I don't want to do is to lead people. That's the last thing you want to do when you're researching this stuff. And he said that the legends say that the moon was brought here hundreds of generations ago by two brothers, Wawani and Umpanku, who were leaders of the reptilians, what the Zulus call the Chitahuri, the children of the python or the children of the serpent, also known as the talkers. And these two brothers, Wawani and Umpanku, the Zulu legends go, were known as the Water Brothers and had scaly skin like a fish. Now, then you go to ancient Sumer, and you see the stories of the Anunnaki and the two brothers, Enlil and what was the other one? Enki. Two brothers, and Enki was very much symbolized as relating to water, as a water god, and was given another name to emphasize that. And so what you're looking at is the same story told by the Zulus about these two reptilian brothers as you get in Sumer, ancient Sumer, thousands of years BC, and what we now call Iraq, also formerly Babylon as well. You get that same story told in southern Africa. And the Zulu legends say that Wawani and Umpanku stole the moon in the form of an egg from the great fire dragon, emptied out the yolk until it was hollow, and then rolled the moon across the sky to the earth and caused, as I say, cataclysmic events. And when you look at the scale of the influence of the moon on life on Earth, it supports the Zulu claim that the arrival of the moon fundamentally changed life on Earth in every single way. Interestingly, one of the Zulu legends about the Chitahuri, the reptilians, is that they threatened humanity in ancient times, a long time ago, that if they did not do what they were told and didn't serve the gods as they were perceived, then the gods would move the moon and cause great catastrophe. So, you know, I could go on and on about this, but you know, the book is 355,000 words because there's so many elements to connect together before the apparently fantastic becomes logically possible and credible. But I can say this in one line: what we know about the moon or think about the moon in our everyday lives without researching it is nothing like what there is to know about the moon.
So let's sort of move ahead a little bit. Let's say we enter this golden age of consciousness, as you say. We break out of the five-sense reality. At that point, are the reptilians exposed for what they are? And what do they do? Do they leave? Do we kill them? I mean, what happens then, do you think?
Well, I'm not the oracle sitting cross-legged on the mountain saying I know it all, and if I was saying that, then people should just walk away. We're all trying to work it out. But what is a very good analogy, again, we have to keep coming back to this because it is an excellent analogy for the reality we're living in. The computer system, what appears on the screen is dictated by the information that the computer is decoding. And this reality is that, it's information. Everything is information being decoded. This wireless internet, this cosmic internet, is information which we're decoding. And in the same way, the meridian lines of the body in the acupuncture system have what the Chinese call qi energy going through these meridian lines. And that is actually photon energy, like this is the photon energy from the sun. We are fundamentally connected to the sun. That's where the information comes from, in the form of photons. That's what we're decoding. And so going through the meridian lines of the body is information. That's what it is. And what they found, of course, this is what acupuncture is based on, is when this information, this energy is not moving around the body at optimum speed, it's too slow or it's too quick, the body becomes ill in some way. It becomes diseased, disharmonized, because the flow is not in harmony. And what acupuncture does through needles and other techniques is bring that qi energy, that information flow, back into harmony, in the same way that when we get a virus in our desktop computer, what's the first thing we say? My computer's slow today. What's the matter with my computer? It's so slow. Why? Because the information is not passing around the computer to the optimum speed for the computer system to work and decode most efficiently, and therefore on the screen things start to become distorted and disharmonized. So the information and the state of the information and the type of information dictates fundamentally 100% what goes on the computer screen. And bringing the analogy back to the reality that we're experiencing, the information that we are decoding through the body computer, it dictates what is the reality that we are perceiving and experiencing. Now, this energetic change I'm talking about, these truth vibrations, what we're actually looking at in this foundation state is a change of information. As this reality goes through its cycle of changing experience, it goes through, clearly, a changing cycle of information. That's what brings about the different epochs, the different yugas. And so as these truth vibrations start to impact themselves more and more, and we attune ourselves to them more and more as we detune ourselves from the energy of the old epoch. In other words, we stop standing in that ever fast-flowing river saying, I ain't moving, and we get on the airbed and say, I'm going to flow with this. In other words, we drop our belief systems and our preconceived ideas that say that can't be, and we open our minds to all possibility. That's what getting on the airbed means in actual experience, opening your mind to all possibility, flowing where life takes you and information takes you. As that happens, then life on this planet is going to be transformed. Life in terms of the moon, the reptilian aspect of it, the control system, it's all going to be transformed because the information epoch on which the control system and this reptilian manipulation is an expression of is in its death throes. It's being replaced by a new information construct, and therefore the old manifestation of the old energy information is going to fall and disappear, and the new one is going to emerge. Now, how that's going to manifest itself in our detailed experience and all that stuff that we're talking about now, well, we're going to have to have the opportunity and the experience of seeing how that unfolds as it unfolds to a large extent. But for sure, if I change the information on this software disk in my tower here, the information or the reality that appears on my screen must change, and that's what's happening now. And we're in this cusp, like I said earlier, where the two information constructs, the two information epochs are actually existing together at this time, and that's why we're in this tussle and turmoil, and some people are waking up and some people are not waking up and all the rest of it, and that's why we're going to go through this period of great turmoil and upheaval, because you cannot change the energetic construct of a reality and not have a point where there's great upheaval as one replaces the other. And of course, as the information takes over from the previous information, then as it plays out in the decoded world of the physical reality as we perceive it, then that upheaval, that change that's going on, that tussle almost that's going on between one energy and the other one, is going to manifest itself in, quote, physical events, collective and individual, that are going to be expressions of that energetic change that's taking place in the waveform vibrational level of this reality, which is the foundation of this whole reality. It's waveform. The reality we see as physical is just the holographic decoded manifestation of that information in the waveform. For instance, when you are creating holograms, the kind of holograms that we buy in the shops, what they do is they have a laser beam, and part of the laser beam is deflected onto a photographic print, holographic photographic print. Other part of the laser beam is played across whatever they want to photograph holographically, and then that is deflected back to the photographic print, where it collides with the other half of the laser beam that's pretty much gone straight there without going across what they're photographing. And on the photographic print, this collision creates what they call a interference pattern. And when you see them, they're like fingerprints. They're waveform. That's what a holographic print looks like. It's waveform. And you say to someone, what's that? And they go, I don't know. It's just wavy lines, mate. And then you get another laser and you fire it at that interference pattern on that photographic holographic print, and suddenly, apparently miraculously, a three-dimensional form, that which has just been photographed, appears in front of your eyes. And the best of them, especially the digital ones they're doing now, are so solid you would believe that they could not possibly be an illusory hologram. Anyway, what is happening with that situation with the hologram is that the information encoded in the waveform on the holographic print is read by the laser into a holographic, apparently three-dimensional form. And that is what the body computer is doing all the time, taking waveform information and turning it into apparently physical things that we are perceiving as the world as we perceive it every day. Now, this answers one of the great mysteries that I see quantum physicists have pondered on for a long time. How can a particle take particle and waveform at the same time? How is that possible? How can a particle be waveform and a waveform be a particle at the same time? Yeah. Dead simple. When you fire the laser at the waveform on the information on the holographic print, and it manifests that holographic three-dimensional illusion as a result. When the hologram manifests itself, the waveform information construct doesn't disappear. The two exist at the same time. One is the information level, the waveform. The other one is the decoded manifestation level, which is the hologram. They appear at the same time, and that's what is happening in our reality as well. There's the information level, waveform, there's the decoded level, particle, holographic. When you, again, you know, we've been talking for quite a time already, Tim, and when you get to this point, now you start to go back to the start of when we were chatting, and you start to realize, hold on a second, shape-shifting is much more straightforward and understandable now than it was when we thought it was shifting from a solid human form to a solid reptilian form and back again. Because the only place the shape-shift takes place is actually in your decoded head, your decoding brain. Because what the body computer does is it takes waveform information, vibrational information. The five senses turn that into electrical information, which is the same information, different form, which is then communicated to the brain, and the brain decodes that information from the electrical into the digital, into the holographic. So when I'm looking at a human form, I appear to be looking at a solid form because through this decoding process, I have decoded the waveform information level of that body into the holographic form. It seems to be a physical body. Now, when there is that energetic shift in these hybrid bloodlines where the reptilian level comes forward, what's happening is the reptilian energetic waveform information level overrides the human level briefly, and to my observation, I'm decoding the waveform information of a human body. Suddenly, I'm now decoding the waveform information of a reptilian body. Now I'm decoding the waveform information of a human body again. And to my decoded observational experiential level of that situation, I'm seeing someone go from physical human, physical reptilian, and back to physical human. None of that's happening except in the decoding in the brain. And that's why when people say you can't go from a physical body to a physical body and back again, I'm the first one to say, of course you can't. But that's not what's happening.
We gotta spread this stuff around.
Now, I want to revisit a pivotal moment here in your career as a researcher and in your life, really, and that's the Terry Wogan interview from 1991. Now, I guess just sort of take us back to that and what was going through your mind when all that went down, because I saw, you know, segments of it, and you looked almost overwhelmed during the whole thing, like there was just so much going on with you that almost, it felt almost like a setup, if you will, like they were taking advantage of someone who was going through this very turbulent change. But I'm interested in, your take on it all.
Yeah, you make some good points actually there. Yes, a lot of that was exactly what was happening. But again, if you look at it from another point of view, it takes on another meaning. It's certainly in my life. What happened in the lead up to that, and it's important to explain the lead up to it. I went to that psychic I mentioned earlier, who told me that I was going to go out on a world stage and reveal great secrets, which at the time, although one level of me thought, yes, this feels right to me, another level of me that's lived in this world, for decades and stuff like that, I was in the 30s at the time, I think, was going, I'm going to do what? What you're talking about. Anyway, after that, I started to go through a series of incredible synchronistic experiences during the year of 1990, after I saw this psychic in March 1990. And it was like, and this has gone on to this day, it was like some unseen force has been handing me pieces in a jigsaw puzzle, virtually in the order I need to have them to most easily understand them. And one of the things that I was told through psychic in that period was no need for arduous searching. It was all you need is to follow the clues. It was all arranged a long time ago. And that's the experience, I have to say, over these 20 years that I've had. And so during that year, I got more and more kind of a grasp on what was happening to me. And I wrote a book called Truth Vibrations, which I finished by the end of 1990, and it went off to the printers. Now, towards the end of 1990, I then had this constant theme in my life and this urging to go to Peru. And I'd be walking down the street, and I'd see an advert for Peru and all the rest of it. And it was just... and by this time, I was starting to understand, having been at it for a year, that this synchronicity of coincidence was actually what I call the language of life. It's life talking to you in the language of synchronicity and coincidence and symbols, etc. So even though I had very little money at the time because I left the BBC and not earned any money for basically best part of a year, I jumped on a plane to Peru. But anyway, long story short, loads and loads of amazing things happened to me. And I ended up in a place called Siyustani, not far from, about an hour's drive from a place called Puno in Peru. And I'd stayed at a hotel in Puno, which was called the Siyustani, and had pictures of this place. It's an Inca ruins site. And so I hired this tourist bus with this tourist guide and stuff that was with me, and we went off. And I went there, and it was a very nice place and beautiful, and I spent about an hour there among the ruins, and it was nice. But when I went back to the bus, I thought, well, what I've just experienced does not match the urging I had to be here. So I was very disappointed, and I got in this bus with windows on the side, a little mini bus, as we call them in Britain, and we go off back to Puno, but about no more than 3 minutes down the road from Siyustani, in this completely uninhabited area virtually, I looked across to my right and I saw this mound. This is February 1991. And I looked at the mound, and all I could hear in my head when I looked at the mound was, come to me, come to me, come to me. And I thought, crikey, that mound's talking to me. But of course it wasn't a mound. It was just an indication this is significant. So I said to the guy, can you stop the bus? I'm going up that mound. I'll only be a minute. Well, I thought I'd be only a minute, but I was over an hour because of what happened. And I walk up this mound, and I didn't see it from the road, but when I got to the top, there was this standing stone circle, which I've actually seen on the internet while I was writing this book, actually. It's the first time I've seen it since I was there. And I walked into the middle of it, and I'm looking back to Siyustani across the valley and the distant mountains. And then my feet start to burn. Now, I'd had this experience before at the start of my experience in 1990, but that's another story. And anyway, it starts to burn, and it's like magnets. My feet are like being pulled to the ground. And then I felt like a drill going into the top of my head and down through my body into the earth, and another flow of energy coming the other way and out the top. And then this, not voice, but very strong thought form, which didn't come from me, just went through my mind and said, first of all, they'll be talking about this 100 years from now. And I'm thinking, talking about what? And the second line immediately afterwards was, it will be over when you feel the rain. And I'm standing at that time under a cloudless Peruvian sky with a piercing, very, very hot sun, and it was ridiculous that it will be over when you feel the rain. I thought it could be here a month. And anyway, what happened then is my arms went out at 45 degrees without me deciding to do it, and above my head. And this energy then started to get more and more and more powerful to the point where my body was shaking. And this went on over a period of the best part of an hour, where I kept going in and out of, consciousness, really, in a way. It's the same principle as driving a car and daydreaming and then wondering where the last 2 miles have gone. Your subconscious has been driving the car. I mean, we'd all be dead without the subconscious, of course. Anyway, one of the times when I came back to awareness of the situation I was in, I noticed that over the distant mountains, somewhere away, there was a light grey mist. And as I watched it, this happened really fast, and over quite a short period, it became a dark grey mist, and it was obvious it was pouring with rain over the distant mountains. And over the next little while, and it was, I was only there about an hour, and it's been going for some time by the time this happened. This rainstorm came out of these distant mountains, and as it got closer, it was just a straight line. It was literally like, I've described it many times, like pulling curtains across the sky. It was a straight line. And eventually the sun was covered up, and in the end, I'm watching a wall of stair rod rain coming towards me in like a straight line. It was just an extraordinary experience. I mean, if you wrote it in a novel, they say, well, that's a bit far-fetched, isn't it? But it happened. Yeah. And eventually, the rain hit me, and at that point, by the time the rain hit me, I mean, my body is just shaking like it's plugged into a nuclear power station. And then when the rain hit me, the energy stopped, and I staggered forward. I could hardly stand because my shoulders that I hadn't felt. My arms had been up at 45 degrees all this time. Yeah. I couldn't felt before was suddenly agony. Anyway, the reason I tell this story is that whatever happened there was the equivalent of having my consciousness or my mind smacked with like an Exocet missile, and it just broke the eggshell. It broke the bubble that I lived in up to that point, the bubble of perception. And suddenly, over the next few days and then weeks, my mind was just flooded with a tidal wave of information, concepts, perceptions. And it was like pressing too many keys on the computer too quickly. The computer says, can't process this, I'm freezing. Yeah. And that's basically what happened to me, Tim. I was processing so much information that basically the computer froze. And that's at that point, synchronistically, I was invited onto the Terry Wogan show, which at that time was the biggest, one of the biggest prime time audience shows in Britain. And the night I was on, I think they got 17 million in a country of just over at that time 50 million. So that's the ratio you're talking about, because it had been all in the papers. This guy Icke's gone crazy. So when I was talking to him, I was still in that state of bewilderment. What's happening to me? And it was funny because while I was talking to him, it was live, of course, and the audience were laughing and ridiculing me and all the rest of it. And after that interview, of course, I was ridiculed wherever I went, mercilessly, constantly, for at least 2 years. Anyway, as I was talking to him, I was aware of two levels. There was the level of David Icke, who had been a television presenter and respected, person in the public eye in Britain, who was dying a death. Oh my God, what have I done? I've destroyed my life. But there was another level of me, which I was so aware of while I was doing the interview, that was saying, it's going to be fine. It's leading somewhere. Don't worry about it. This is leading somewhere. It's going to be fine. And with the passage of what we call time, it has been. But again, about my journey, the things that happened to us, what happened to me as a result of that interview, like I say, is I went through the most amazing levels of ridicule. I mean, there can be few people in this country, possibly anywhere, who've been through such a concentrated, massive, unmerciless period of mass ridicule. I mean, I couldn't walk down the street. Going into a pub or a bar, forget it. There was uproar, you know, and it was just an incredible experience. I would stop at my car at the traffic lights, and the people in the cars around me would be laughing at me. It was just, you just couldn't get away from it. And when you go through that level of ridicule, then one of two things happen. Either you go crazy, or you go away and hide, and it's over, or you break through something. You break through that fear of what other people think of you, and how other people perceive you. And I wrote a book just after that called "I Am Me, I Am Free," which was basically inspired by the fact that I went through this process of letting the mass ridicule serve me in a way. I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, but with hindsight I can see it, to release me from the prison that most people live in, which is the fear of what other people think. Now, in my journey up to this point, and again, we come back to what we were talking about right at the start with the reptilians, if I had not been through that process of mass ridicule and therefore cleansing this concern with what other people thought of me, there is no way in the world that I would ever go public about shape-shifting reptilians.
Yeah.
The number of people that have said to me, look, mate, I've seen it. I'll tell you what I've seen it, but don't mention my name. I can't take the stick I'll get if people know it's me. If someone's going to put these things out, if somebody, for goodness sake, mate, if someone's going to talk about the moon not being real and all that stuff, along with reptilians and along with this is an illusory reality, then if you've got any vestiges of worrying about what people think of you and how they might ridicule you, laugh at you, dismiss you, then forget it. You ain't going to go there.
Yeah.
And this is why the personal journey of people doing this and the information that they are uncovering and pursuing and communicating are fundamentally connected, because the person has to work on themselves to get to a point where they can put this information out. Because if they don't, then they're not going to put it out, and they're going to say, I'll go here because people won't laugh at me here up to this point, but I ain't going there. And therefore all this information, which people need to have access to so they can say, well, what do I think of it, would never get circulating. You know what, when I came across the reptilian stuff, I put reptilian ETs and variations of those words into a search engine, and I got a handful of pages. Put those words in now. Tens and tens and tens of thousands of them. That's because once it gets out and it starts circulating, then it's got a chance of having people look at it and think, well, it may sound crazy, but let's just look at it without preconceived idea. Do you know, this seems to make sense. A number of people have said to me, it makes sense to me. It shouldn't. I know it shouldn't, but it does when I look at it. But they wouldn't say that unless someone put it out there.
Exactly, yeah. And it must be, gratifying, because like what happened in that interview, everyone was kind of laughing at you and everything, and I saw the 2006 Wogan interview, and it seemed like it was a complete reversal. I mean, it seemed like they were laughing at him almost for being sort of clueless to what's going on.
Yeah, that was the end. It's an interesting that you should bring that up, because when I was asked to go on the Wogan show just a few years ago now, where he was interviewing guests that he'd interviewed in his previous series years ago that I talked about.
Yeah.
I said yes immediately, because something told me this is the end of an era. This is tying the ends of that period of your life. And so, because by this time, of course, I'm a very, very different person. I'm a much wiser person. I've had that come to me through sheer experience. I understood so much more. I wasn't in a bewildered state anymore, thinking what's happening to me or what the heck's going on. I mean, I was only weeks. It's only like a few weeks after that experience in Peru that I was sitting in that studio in the first interview. So when I went on, it was a very, very different interview. And I walked out of that studio that day, and I thought, okay, new era starts now. That's the old one. That's the end's tied of the old one. Now we start a new one, and that's pretty much what has happened. So it's funny how life works, and how we attract these synchronistic things to us, which we call coincidence, but are not coincidence at all.
Well, while we're talking about sort of like periods of your life, I feel compelled to ask you about this whole turquoise period, because I know I've heard a lot about it, and I feel like I haven't really heard anything about it from you in recent years, maybe because people are afraid to embarrass you about it. I don't mean to, put you on the spot or embarrass you about it. I mean, I feel like maybe it's sort of like the whole idea of like people's hairstyles in the 80s, like what was I thinking back then? Is that what this is all about? Or, what was going on with the whole turquoise period?
It's real simple. It just fits in with what we've been talking about. After I'd had that experience on the mound in Peru, and I came back to Britain, I became extraordinarily attracted to the color turquoise. Simple as that. And it was so fast after the experience in Peru on the mound that clearly the two were completely connected. And of course, turquoise is a sacred stone, sacred color to Native Americans and stuff like that. And the first time I met Credo Mutwa in South Africa, he was decked from his neck to his feet in bright turquoise. So I was very, very attracted to that color for about 3 months, and I used to wear it all the time. And then after the Wogan interview, the first one, and I went through all that massive ridicule, and I'm still thinking, what's happening to me? Suddenly, it was like waking up. Well, it was a period probably about 3 months from the mound to what I'm about to talk about. I was almost woke up one morning, and everything had morphed into some kind of clarity, and if you like, the computer had unfrozen. And as the computer unfroze, so I ditched the turquoise. I didn't feel that I needed to wear that anymore, and I haven't ever since. But I still think it's a lovely color. I mean, I've got a lot of, I like that color a lot, and
yeah.
But it was just that period where I was massively attracted to it, because of course, as you well know, Tim, everything's a vibration. The colors are vibration, and colors, like all vibrations, carry certain amounts of information. They affect you emotionally because they affect you vibrationally. This is why when someone puts a certain color on, they'll say, "Oh, you look so good in that color. It just makes you sort of vibrant."
Yeah.
Then you put another color on, and it just takes all the energy or the color out of your face. And yet someone else could swap those colors and have the opposite experience to you. So we sync with different vibrations, which we call colors and shades of color, in different ways. And at that point, because of something going on in me vibrationally, because of that mound, I became very attracted, i.e. vibrationally attracted to the color turquoise. And then when the computer unfroze, if you like, bang, the turquoise I was not attracted to it anymore in the same way.
Okay, interesting. Now I'm going to sort of hit some just general sort of questions. Now, in your work, you pretty much say the reptilians are a race of, for lack of a better term, ancient aliens, let's say. With that in mind, what do you make of contemporary UFOs and what's going on here with the UFO phenomenon of the last 60 years or so?
Well, because there are so many levels to this, and there are so many aspects to this tapestry of knowledge, and this tapestry that is the world that we live in, and there's so many levels to it, so many vibrational levels to it, and what have you. It's difficult because you talk on one level, okay, about the 5 sense level, and you'll use certain words, and then you'll talk about another level, the interdimensional level, and you might use other words. So I don't talk about them as extraterrestrial, though they're obviously, if they're not of the Earth, they're extraterrestrial. Everything is.
Yeah.
I call them interdimensionals because I think they move in and out of this reality. But of course, what we're dealing with is all possibility. You know, when I perceive infinite reality, I perceive its core as all possibility, infinite potential, unmanifest potential, and that manifests itself as stillness and silence. Because we think that silence, you say to people, what can you hear? And they go, nothing. But actually, they can hear everything, because within the silence is all possibility, unmanifest. When I start talking, I am pulling one possibility out of all possibility, and when I stop talking, it's gone back into all possibility again. And so the core of infinite reality is actually stillness and silence. It's unmanifest potential. And this is why when I was the only time I've taken a psychoactive drug called ayahuasca in Brazilian rainforest in 2003, this voice took a female form, talked to me for 5 hours in great detail about the illusory nature of reality. And one of the things it said to me was, if it vibrates, it's illusion. Because the base state of everything is stillness and silence. If it vibrates, it's illusion. It's creation out of all possibility. And so we have these worlds that we call realities, like this frequency range and another dimensional frequency range and all the rest of it, which are actually vibrating to a certain speed. That creates the reality and the frequency range within which a certain experience reality exists. And of course, like I say, they interpenetrate each other like radio stations. So what we're dealing with when we talk about extraterrestrials and other forms of life not of this world, we're actually dealing with all possibility. Therefore, anything is possible. So, you know, when you look at the different forms there are in this world, different human forms from the Chinese to the black South Africans, etc., and all the amazingly different forms in the animal kingdom, the animal realm, that's just a tiny, 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 tiny fraction of all possibility that we're looking at. And look at the diversity. It's unbelievable. So then you take it on to the next stage, Tim, when you go beyond this planet or even beyond this reality, and then just multiply the potential of possibilities and manifestations of possibility. But well, crikey, you're into infinity already. Yeah. So when I talk about the reptilians, I'm just talking about one aspect, one expression of a form, a species, if you like. But there are infinite other forms out there that are in different states of awareness. Some of them are very intellectually dominated, and they're therefore very technologically advanced, but very spiritually dead. And they can be very dangerous and destructive because they're very clever, but they're not wise, and cleverness without wisdom is the most destructive force you could come across, because, you know, you can be clever enough to make an atomic bomb, but if you're wise, then you don't, and you're certainly wise if you don't drop it. Yeah. So we're dealing with these reptilians that appear to be very intellectually advanced, therefore technologically advanced and aware of how you can manipulate energy and situations and mind control and all the rest of it, but they're not expansive enough in their consciousness to use that knowledge wisely. So they use it for control and manipulation and imposition. But there are other non-human species out there in their different forms, both within this reality and in other realities that intersperse with this one or interact with it, that do have an awakened consciousness and do have a benevolent agenda, if you like, or view of the earth and humans and what we're going through. So there are many, many different forms out there, and it's not just about, you know, if you like, controlling extraterrestrial or interdimensionals, and that's it. There are many, many different aspects of this. And so, people can have experiences of non-human entities, and some of them can be of the manipulating type, but some of them can be of the benevolent type. It's just, there are so many different... see, this is the funny thing. People say, is there life out there? Do you think extraterrestrials are visiting the Earth? I mean, if we only realized it, I mean, there's enormous numbers of different species that are interacting with this planet.
Yeah.
It's not, just we found one. There's loads of them. But most of them operate outside of our immediate frequency range of what we call visible light and electromagnetic spectrum that we can decode. And therefore we don't see them. And I think that maybe a major part of this epoch change as we expand our consciousness is that we are going to start to encompass and interact as a matter of course eventually with these other extraterrestrial non-human species and groups because there's so many out there.
Okay. Here's sort of a question that just came to me throughout the course of this conversation here now. It's sort of a really big picture question, but it's one that I'm really intrigued to ask you, and that's, in light of all this stuff, okay, the illusory nature of reality and the multiple dimensions and the reptilians and everything else, I guess, have you ever pondered the nature of a God entity? What's your take on, the ultimate creator? I mean, do you think that it's some sort of intelligence, or is it some sort of like mathematical equation or a wave, if you will, something that's a force of nature more so than, an intelligent designer, if you will? Like, what do you think of all that?
Well, we go back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago. For me, what people call God, what I call the infinite, is that silent, still, all possibility. And from that becomes manifest worlds. Okay. And because we're all, in the end, the same consciousness, we're all that infinite possibility made manifest. In the end, we're all the infinite. We're all expressions of it. And in so many ways, it seems to me that what we're experiencing is the infinite experiencing itself. In other words, as we experience ourselves, we are the infinite experiencing itself. And I look upon this reality. And of course, if you're going to experience yourself, it's not always, imagine if you went through life, and I mean, I can talk from my own experience big time about this, I already have. If I went through my life, and from the time I was born to now, I'd had it easy, and everything had been fine and rosy, and I hadn't had any challenges, and I hadn't had all these things that have happened to me, would I be doing what I'm doing now, saying what I'm saying now? No way would I be doing what I'm doing now. So, experience is experience, and sometimes it's experience we don't like, and sometimes it's experience we do like, but it's just an experience. And if we can pull back from I am David Icke, I am my experience, to I am infinite consciousness having an experience as David Icke, having these experiences, then you kind of one step back from getting pulled completely into the experience and becoming engulfed by it. And the way I see, this is the thing, Tim, it's difficult sometimes because you get asked questions, and understandably, in different situations over the time about this, that, and the other, and you answer them from the point of view that the question's being given. Yeah. But what actually I'm doing is I'm seeing all these different things at different levels, but realizing that they're just points of observation. So from the point of observation of humans in a physical body having an experience now, the world is being taken over by crazies and being taken over by deeply flawed people who are using computer program type people in uniforms and dark suits to take the world over for them. At that point, you can observe it from that point. From another point, you can observe it and say, actually, it's a group of extraterrestrials that are taking over this planet, or interdimensionals who are taking over this planet, and they're using these people in dark suits and uniforms to do it. And then you can go wider and wider to the point where you say, it's all a game. It's all a cosmic game. That's all it is. It's just an experience. And we're experiencing a I had been experiencing a very challenging part of this yuga cycle, this vibrational cycle that manifests itself as apparently the cyclic nature of what we call time. But time and space are just what we decode from the information construct into the appearance of time and space in the holographic world. And so when I look at it from the big picture, it's an experience. And there was no one on another level pointing an AK-47 at our consciousness and saying, get in that body or I shoot. So what we need to ask the question is, why did we choose to be here at this time, having this experience? It's like the Oracle said to Neo in the Matrix, you're not here to make a choice. You've already made the choice. That is being here. What you need to understand is why you made the choice. And what happens is when consciousness is experiencing through the lens of the physical body, the body computer, it has its perception range limited and suppressed, because it is experiencing this reality through a vehicle. And it's like when a spaceman goes out in space, he's limited by the vehicle that he wouldn't be if he wasn't in the spacesuit. Yeah. And I was I mentioned this in the book. I had an experience maybe a couple of years back now, where I'm sitting in the bath and suddenly this series of pictures appeared to me. And the first one was billowing energy. It was a yellow billowing energy, which I took for some reason immediately to be consciousness. And then an eye appeared in the energy, and then in front of the eye appeared a telescope. And on the end of the telescope was the Earth and this solar system, this universe. And then the last movement was that the telescope morphed into a human body. So the eye, consciousness, is looking through the body into this reality. And so what happens is that we experience our lives here from the limited perception of the lens, the body computer, but that level of us that made the decision to be here and to experience this actually is not subject to that limitation. So therefore we go through our lives and we're saying, I'd never have agreed to this, I'd never have done it, stupid, never would I have agreed to this. But then again, it's like you're not here to make the choice. Yeah. You're here to understand why you made the choice. And the more that people expand their consciousness, the more they break out of the imprisonment of preconceived idea and preconceived rigid belief, the more they vibrationally get closer to that level of self, which is outside of the body computer. And when you do that, I know from my own experience, the more you start to then understand, I understand why I am here doing this and why all these things have happened to me, because it was to get me to this point in terms of my understanding so I could do what's coming next. And it's a completely different way of looking at the world and looking at our own lives. I wouldn't change. Well, maybe it's a couple of things I would change, but there were people that came into my life and caused mayhem. But they, apart from that, and again, they provided experiences. Same thing, really. It's just that I would rather not have them. But when I look at my life and my experience now, I don't see it the way I did before I started to look at life differently. And life is easier when you do that, because you don't get pulled into this, why me? Why am I so unlucky? How could this happen to me? I'm just a good guy trying to do good things. Why is this happening to me? Because you start to realize that the experiences you have that often you don't like are the ones that give you the greatest gifts. I've said many times in my books over the years, life has this brilliant ability to give you your greatest gifts brilliantly disguised as your worst nightmare. I mean, we've all experienced that. I'm sure I have.
Absolutely.
And you look back and you think, I wouldn't want to experience it again, but I'm glad that I did, because it led here. And there's so much going on in our lives, and there's so much going on around us. There's so much going on in our awareness. And if you start to read the language of life, which is how the holographic world talks to us, because the holographic world is a a manifestation of the energy, the information construct. By reading the signs in the holographic world, you're actually, with your conscious mind, reading the information construct, and therefore you can see things. It's like if you decide, preconceived idea, this is what I want to do with my life, and this is, I'm not taking anything else. Well, that's fair enough. That's a choice. But what if the door to what you want to do just won't open? What do? You bang it a bit more? What do? Kick it now? It's still not opening. And yet over there is a door swinging open saying, over here, this is for you. But no, I want to do this. And so being fluid and not rigid, because when we have any form of preconceived rigid belief, then we're already limiting all possibility.
Yeah.
To access all possibility, we need to be on that airbed, not standing there in the river saying I ain't moving, because what that's saying is I have now limited my possibility to I ain't moving. That's it. There is no other possibility.
Yeah.
But you get on the airbed and you flow with it and you say, look, I'll go where life takes me and I'll go where my intuition feels to go. Life, it starts to be an adventure, and that's open to everybody. Everybody. All we need to do is to remove the cause of the problem, and that's preconceived idea, preconceived belief, and the perception of self that we are David Icke, Ethel Jones, or Charlie Smith. We ain't. That's our experience. When we realize that we are infinite consciousness, infinite potential, having that experience, then our sense of limitation starts to dissolve.
Interesting. Okay. Now, taking things down to a purely human level here, and as someone who, is obviously an icon of the conspiracy research genre, what do you make of what seems to be sort of a stagnation of the whole 9/11 truth movement? I mean, it seemed like it had a lot of momentum going for it up until about the 5th anniversary, and it's sort of been winding down since then. It's really not the hot button topic it used to be.
No, well, there's a few reasons for that, I think, and one of the main ones is the passage of what we call time. It's like Bill Hicks, the great American comedian. He, as part of his act, he used to say that people used to say to him, "What do you keep going on about the Kennedy assassination, man? It's long ago. Forget about it." And he says, "Well, don't keep talking about Jesus to me then, But the point I'm making is that it's like, oh, that's the Kennedy assassination. The fact that the Kennedy assassination was an incredibly potent example of the way the control system works and how it manipulates and covers up, people forget, because it was back then. And with every year that passes, of course, in the public mind, 9/11 becomes less and less important. I mean, even the manipulators are hardly talking about it now. So that, of course, is a real basic reason why it's lost its momentum. And also, ironically, my feeling is that it's actually a fundamentally important area of research, because if you can show that 9/11, as it can be, but if you can get it in the public arena that in a massive way that 9/11 was a scam, then everything that's followed since it is part of that scam. I mean, Afghanistan, Iraq, I mean, they kind of directly connected to 9/11, but they bloody tried, and the whole atmosphere of going in there came from 9/11. The war on terror, the police state, the Orwellian state, all comes back to 9/11. So it is a fundamentally important subject, and I'm very sad that it has lost momentum, because it needs to go on being uncovered and go on being exposed, because in so many ways it's the thing that everything else rests upon that's come since it happened. And another area that I would suggest that is related to this, Tim, is that there comes a point where you keep saying the same thing, and it might be true, but you're going round in circles. What is there left but to say the same thing again?
Yeah.
And this is what happens if you operate, as we were talking about earlier, in this I'm going here but no further realm. I'm going here but no further. Once you say that, then then all you can do in the end is just repeat yourself, because the area you're working in eventually gets worked out in terms of anything new.
Yeah.
But if you say, look, let's just look at this dispassionately, okay? Let's just take a deep breath and just sit back and look at this. Look at how the control system is coming in a multi-leveled, synchronistically connected way, where you've got everything from food additives to banking scams to oil disasters to wars to the medical scam to the transnational corporation pharmaceutical scam, and then you've got the manipulation of the military, you've got the manipulation of governments, you've got the World Health Organization manipulating this vaccine. Look at it. Look at it, how it's all coming in across the world together. And then tell me that it's being orchestrated by a group of men, mostly men, in dark suits, sitting around a table saying, okay, what's our next move? It ain't. It's bigger than that. It's much bigger than that. It's the only way it could happen if it was bigger than that. The rabbit hole goes infinitely deeper than that level of it, and if you only stay at that level and you will not expand and look at the deeper levels of the rabbit hole, then eventually, of course, as I say, you're going to basically work out the mine, you're going to work out the oil well of information, and you basically going to then spend the rest of your time, in effect, repeating what you've already said. And what happens then is things lose their momentum. Because, oh yeah, I've heard it before, and you're saying the same thing again. When we're dealing with all possibility, and we're dealing with the scale of what's going on, then we have to constantly keep expanding our awareness and our area of research with the understanding that it is much bigger than ever people thought about. And therefore, when you do that, the momentum continues, because you're constantly uncovering new things, new levels to it. And in the end, this is only gonna really change when this reality that we're experiencing is very, very akin symbolically to a movie theater.
Yeah.
By the time you're looking at the movie screen, it's a done deal. It's a done deal. You've got the actors acting on the screen, and you're watching them. There's no way at the point where that movie hits the screen that you're going to change it. No way. It's a done deal. And so the same with our reality. When we have decoded the vibrational information into electrical information, into holographic information, by the time it hits holographic information and we're experiencing it, it's a done deal. You ain't going to change it there. This is why the system is quite happy for people to believe that the answer is out there as we perceive it. It's not. As we experience the world, it's happened. It's a done deal. You're not going to change it now. What we need to do is to go to deeper levels of self, what we call the subconscious, and not just the subconscious of the individual, but the subconscious of this reality, the information waveform level of this. In the movie theater terms, we need to get to the back of the theater where the projector is, and we need to change the reel. Because if we don't change the reel, that movie, done deal, is going to keep playing out on the screen. And so the rabbit hole is much deeper. It's much deeper in terms of how the cabal and the control system is orchestrated, and it's much, much deeper in terms of where it comes from and where the answer to it comes from. Because in the end, everything is a manifestation of waveform information, vibrational information. That's what we have to change. And if we just go round and round in the garden, as much of the conspiracy research movement has started to do, and won't go any further, that Icke's crazy, or he can't go there, that's mad, that would never happen, it's not in line with my religion, and anyway, it's not in line with my vision of reality, I ain't going there, then of course, it's bound to lose momentum. You can't help it.
Interesting. To take it to a personal level here now, I take it based on what you said earlier, that you're sort of just relishing this life. You don't really wish that things had gone differently or that you hadn't really gone on this journey. So we don't really need to go there, I guess you could say. But looking back, if you hadn't gotten into all this, if this awakening hadn't happened to you, what do you think would have become of David Icke? You were pretty much a rising star there in the Green Party and a television presenter. Where do you think you'd be here in 2010?
Well, I'd probably be kind of coming to the end of a television career or something like that. But because, my journey was never going to be that, it was never going to be that. It was always going to be this. And so I don't really think about where I was going to go. I mean, I look at my life, and I wouldn't want to be anyone else doing anything else but me doing this. And that's a privilege, really, because I'm sure there are many, many, many unbelievable numbers of people in the world that wouldn't have wouldn't say that about their own lives. So I wouldn't change that. I mean, I'd change some people that came into my life. I mean, one of the ironies is that some of the people that have told me most times verbally how much they love me and how much they care for my work and how vital my work is and it must get out there, have turned out to be the people that have been most challenging to my health, my life, my work. That's a kind of irony, but I've learned a lot from it. It's an experience, and therefore it's an experience I've grown from. But I would rather it not have happened. Life would have been easier without it, I can tell you. Yeah. But you accept these things and you get on with them, and I wouldn't change anything that I'm doing. And I just look forward. I think it's 20 years since I consciously started to awaken, and when I look at the amazing things that I've seen and come across, and of course we're going down the rabbit hole. Therefore, they're going to become more amazing and more extraordinary, and as we get deeper in the rabbit hole, more and more potent to what is necessary to turn this around and make a difference. So, I look forward to the rest of my life with tremendous anticipation, and I don't want to leave this reality, no matter what happens, until the job's done, really, or my part in it's done anyway.
Well, that's a perfect segue to the final question here before we get to what's next for you, and that's sort of an existential question. That's, you've been doing this for 20 years. I guess the existential part of it is like, when do you know when you're done? When is the work done?
I think, from my experience over this period, my work will be done when I'm no longer here. I think that's it, really. I think that, and I kind of came across this right early on, 20 years